are in Boise, Idaho right now, and we're going to try and see as many dams here in southern Idaho as we can in one afternoon. We're just south of downtown near the university. We just saw the Broncos Stadium, the newest members of the Pac-12 football conference. Go Cougs. But most of all, go Vandals. So we are heading up the Boise River Canyon towards Arrowrock Dam. Now this is the original large storage dam in the Treasure Valley, finished in 1915. And while there are several diversion dams that predate this one in the Boise area, Arrowrock was the true game changer for the valley. Because for the first time, they were able to store the snowmelt in the springtime and use it during the summertime. This one piece of infrastructure transformed the Boise Valley from a total dry desert into some of the most productive cropland in the West. It's truly amazing how rugged this canyon is. I can only imagine trying to punch a road or some railroad tracks up here 120 some years ago, especially considering the huge floods that they used to get on the Boise River. Like a lot of rivers in the West, it would naturally go 20 times its seasonal flow for a short period of time every spring. Makes it kind of hard to build train tracks on the banks. Oh man, this is incredible. Wow, wow, wow. Whoa, that is a dramatic reveal. This is cool. Believe it or not, this dam was constructed before the era of hydropower. In fact, that small hydroelectric facility was only built in 2010. So an interesting detail about the power station here at Arrowrock Dam is the way it sits up on the bank. When you build a hydropower station, you always want to maximize the amount of hydraulic head, basically the vertical distance from the top water to the bottom. But since Arrowrock Dam sits at the upstream end of Lucky Peak Reservoir, that downstream elevation is always changing, which means that the power station had to be situated above the maximum elevation of the downstream reservoir. On one hand, this does mean that the overall generating capacity of Arrowrock Dam is reduced. But on the other hand, it's nice to know that your generator is never going to get flooded. This likely explains why in the dry season, Lucky Peak Reservoir is drawn all the way down and some surplus water is kept up in Arrowrock. It's actually fascinating to me that this dam went 90 years without having any power generation. This dam is not small and it's not on a small river. I don't understand why they didn't put the generators in sooner. But it just goes to show you that there are hundreds of facilities just like this one that could be upgraded to generate clean, reliable hydropower. We have not maxed out the amount of clean energy we can get from our existing dams. As originally designed, Arrowrock had a rather crude method for passing water, with 3 sets of outlet pipes at high, medium, and low elevations on the dam. The fourth way was with the overflow spillway on the right abutment. Decades later, a second storage dam was built downstream at Lucky Peak. Both dams work together to provide a massive amount of irrigation storage. But the funny thing is Lucky Peak Reservoir actually abuts halfway up Arrowrock Dam. You can see the high water mark there, almost halfway up the structure. As a result, Arrowrock looks very different at different times of the year. Right now it's late September, and this is about as much of the dam face exposed as you're ever gonna see. This spring, when all of the high mountain snow runs into the valley, Arrowrock Reservoir will fill up first, and then Lucky Peak will fill right up to that line there. Arrowrock represents a real turning point in the history of large dam construction. Valuable experience was gained here at Arrowrock that came in real handy on some of the bigger projects in the future, like Hoover Dam in Nevada and Grand Coulee Dam in Washington. 110 years later, Arrowrock is still a vital part of the irrigation storage system of southern Idaho. So Arrowrock Dam was built all the way back in 1915. Back then, pretty much everything had to be brought up through locomotive or pack team. This was a very remote site and a very rugged canyon. Legendary dam engineer Frank Crow was the right guy for the job. He was the one who figured out that you could build overhead tramways to transport men and materials to the job site. This narrow spot in the canyon walls was perfect for stringing multiple aerial tramways. They all came together here on the left bank, then splayed out to different spots on the right bank. These aerial tramways allowed the construction crews to place the concrete exactly where it was required without having to build a whole lot of extra scaffolding along the way. A technique that was repeated pretty much on every dam built since. All right, so we just finished up at Arrowrock Dam. This is Lucky Peak Dam just downstream from Arrowrock. We're gonna see if we can get a good view of it. Let's take a look at Lucky Peak. Behind me is Lucky Peak Dam outside of Boise, Idaho. It's the second in a pair of irrigation storage dams that impound water in the springtime to allow it to be used for agriculture during the summer. It's a couple 100-foot tall zoned earth-fill dam and pretty impressive if you ask me. The part that perplexes me is that while the original dam up top, Arrowrock, was built by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, Lucky Peak was built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Two competing agencies back to back. I'm sure there's a story there. While Arrowrock was the original high storage on the Boise River, Lucky Peak more than doubles the amount of water that can be stored for the Boise Valley. Together, these two dams are the main reason why the largest city in Idaho exists. Without it, this would be nothing but scrub brush and dirt. This pair of dams on the Boise River is the perfect example of what we mean when we say reclamation. You're taking existing natural resources and harnessing them in a specific way in order to reclaim land that was previously unproductive and is now able to be put to practical use for the people of the community. This is the Boise River Diversion Dam, which pulls water out of the river and into a canal to service thousands of miles of agriculture around Idaho's capital. This dam was built way back in 1909, which means that it predates all of the large storage reservoirs upstream. That means that in the springtime, this little dam here would have to pass 10 to 15 feet of floodwater over that ungated spillway. That must have been a crazy sight, followed by months and months of the river going down to just a trickle during the dry season, and what little water there was in the river getting diverted into the canal. But just 6 years later, Arrowrock Dam was completed upstream, allowing spring floods to be captured and the Boise River to become consistent year-round. Despite being nearly 120 years old, this dam is operating pretty much the same as the day it was built, diverting water out of the Boise River and into the canal, supporting hundreds of thousands of acres of agriculture. Wow, we are really in the middle of nowhere. We are out to find Swan Falls Dam. Maybe the oldest working dam in the entire state of Idaho. It's beautiful out here, especially at sunset. And all I can see everywhere I look is miles and miles of this shrubland. Now the soil out here is basically the same as what's being cultivated closer to Boise. The only difference is water. When the pioneers first came out here about 150 years ago, this entire valley looked like this. And it illustrates the power of reclamation, being able to take vast amounts of land that was not able to support human civilization and turn it into one of the nicest, fastest growing cities in America. But man, to get to Swan Falls, it is truly in the middle of nowhere. There it is, Swan Falls Dam. This is Swan Falls Dam on the Middle Snake River in Idaho. It is the oldest hydropower station in the entire state, dating all the way back to 1905. 1905. Teddy Roosevelt was in the White House. American football was still decades away from having a forward pass. And the state of Idaho itself was only 16 years old. Commercial scale electricity was barely a thing back then. It was originally constructed to supply three-phase power to nearby mining operations. That same three-phase power is the standard that we use today. To me, this dam is notable for two reasons. One, it's adorable. I mean, just look at that original power plant. It looks like a Victorian dollhouse. But second, this dam does not and has never had any kind of fish passage. That's right, for over half a century, this dam right here was the end of salmon migration on the Middle Snake, blocking hundreds of river miles from here all the way up to Twin Falls. Now in some ways this is a moot point because we are upstream of the three dams of the Hells Canyon complex, meaning that even if you did add fish ladders, they wouldn't be able to get up here anyway. But it's a good reminder of the complexity of the situation. We spend a lot of time talking about the dams in the Snake River that do not block salmon habitat, and spend almost no time talking about the dams that do block habitat. Well, we did it. We saw 4 southern Idaho dams in one afternoon. We started off at Arrowrock, then went down to Lucky Peak, and saw the Boise Diversion Dam, and finished the day with the oldest dam in Idaho, Swan Falls. Not bad. It's worth pointing out that all these dams serve significant positive purposes. I think all but one of them generate hydropower, but none of them have any fish passage. In fact, no dams in the entire state of Idaho have any fish passage. This does not negate the value that these structures bring to everyday life. After all, Boise, the capital of Idaho, would not exist without the irrigation storage brought about by Lucky Peak and Arrowrock reservoirs. But it's worth looking at the big picture when it comes to restoration of the ecosystem on the Snake River. There are a lot more factors than just the lower Snake River dams. And on this road trip, we got to see a small piece of that. Thanks for watching.